Welcome back to another episode of We Burn Blue. There we go, starting up a new season, same old intro, but we're back. We're back, baby. How you feeling, Sharon, after a nice summer hiatus?
Yeah, feeling on top of the world, right, Prashant? Because now we're the best team in the world.
World champions, baby.
Yeah, I don't know how much to lean into this because it is the Club World Cup, and it's not like we've ever placed that much importance on the winners of it. But yeah, considering the new format, man, I think we do have some bragging rights here.
4 years worth of bragging rights, man. 4 years with a golden badge on our shirt. The badge is a bit fugly, if I'm being honest, but you know what? 4 years, nobody else has that.
But I just wonder, what is FIFA gonna do without the revenues for the till until the next tournament, you know?
They have the World Cup next year, right? So that's one of their revenue channels. And I'm sure they'll come up with another. Somebody said the
They'll
Galactic
come up
Cup
with mini
somewhere or the other.
Club World Cups, right?
Yeah. We'll find
Another
a way
thing
to
I
get
was
in and win
wondering
those.
was like, do we automatically qualify for the next Club World Cup since we won it?
I think we would. I think, yeah. I feel like that's like a given, right? It's based on the cups you win in the previous 4 years. So that should be one of them. And then who knows what else we'll win.
It would be very FIFA if we didn't, and then we had to go through some sort of qualifier or something to do it. Imagine if they start having qualifiers for the Club World Cup since it's a 4-year tournament, man. It's crazy what these guys will do for money.
I know, right? But it also would be very FIFA to do that, and it would be very us to win those qualifiers and win it again.
Yeah, I mean, shit, we'll just add like a third squad to our roster, right? At this stage. They just don't mind adding more and more players. But I guess we'll come on to that. I think we briefly wanted to touch on the Club World Cup. I mean, we won it, which is amazing, right? Like I think kudos to the team, and not just the playing staff. But yeah, what were your thoughts on the tournament overall?
I mean, I think from a Chelsea perspective, we tweeted out our thoughts just before it started, and I mean, I was like, we get to the quarterfinals, and that's like a decent run in. I didn't expect us to go all the way because I figured we would actually finish top of our group and have a tougher side of the bracket. We happened to, lose the Flamengo game, and it's almost like Maresca was playing 4D chess because we got an easier route to the final, and yeah, I mean, when we even every game as we were going with the Brazilian teams, I felt okay, we had a bit of an advantage. But coming to the final, I was like, the way PSG are playing, I didn't think we'd be able to do it. But man, oh man, Maresca really, really turned up, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you say we had a bit of an advantage with the Brazilian teams, but they equally had great tournaments, I think. Expectations were lower for them, and that I think makes it easier on the balance of play, but you still have to go out and beat the European competition. I think, yeah, 4D chess, whether to give Maresca that credit or not, I don't know, but yeah, we would have gotten Bayern Munich instead of, I think it was Benfica, right? But I don't know, man. I think in that regard, I back us to beat Bayern Munich. I mean, I'm not saying we're like actually the best team in the world. Everybody knows that I'm going to continue my same dulcet tones from last season, but I do think we're a stronger team than Bayern Munich, a better cohesive unit. But yeah. In terms of a Chelsea perspective, like you mentioned, really, really no complaints at all. I think we also saw that this was an opportunity for players to rectify some poor form. I'm thinking of Sanchez and Gusto, and calling out Palmer, which we were doing at the end of last season. Um, and there are lots of reasons as to why he was underperforming. Some of those being his teammates, namely Jackson. But you saw when he has strikers, competent strikers in front of him, you saw what happens, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think just a competent unit in front of him, and this is carrying into preseason, the couple of games where we've seen a more productive front line of sorts. It's looking really sharp. And yeah, you mentioned it was a chance for some players to do well. Even the likes of Nkunku, I think, had a pretty good run out. And overall, yeah, happy with the tournament. I think from a FIFA perspective, like we joked about the money thing, there were lots of things that worked and didn't work about this tournament. It gave us a preview as to the summer World Cup in the US, and with the US situation as is from an immigration perspective, it's a whole other conversation. But I mean, overall, can't complain. We're going into the next season pretty strong. I think we tweeted this as well, that the Club World Cup was more like a preseason, I think, and less like an continuation of the last season because of the fact that we got to see new players in, he got to try different things. So in that regard, even though we had 3 weeks off, I think you could see the players were pretty sharp coming into those two games.
Yeah, I mean, all valid points. I like that you mentioned Nkunku's form in this tournament because by the end of it, I remember messaging you saying like, is there a chance he actually stays? Um, I think on the balance of it, I mean, we'll come to the transfers in the squad later, but on the balance of it, it does look like Nkunku is playing for, like auditioning for potential suitors rather than actually wanting to stay at Chelsea. But hey, man. He definitely supported us in winning this tournament, and he made sure that his work rate is at a top level, and um, he's quite an intelligent guy. I mean, I wouldn't we wouldn't go amiss in keeping him, but anyway, we'll come on to transfers later. Now, like a lot has already been mentioned in the media, and Maresca has spoken to the fact that we have a very short preseason. I'm just wondering, right? Like the club mentioned, a few months ago that they do see this as like just one long extended season rather than two separate seasons. What sort of impact are you expecting? Um, I guess, I guess you can talk about performance, you can talk about player fitness, but in general, what sort of impact can we expect this season, having played well into the summer in the Club World Cup?
I think the biggest question marks come over player fitness, and we've already seen that happen. Huge injury blow with Colwell doing his ACL in. I think that's probably one consequence of this sort of extended period of play. Overall, I think that's probably the biggest negative impact. And while that is the case, I think the club are doing well with the way they're going about the window to make sure there is depth across all areas of the field. The flip side is I think we're going to see a very cohesive unit, which I mentioned earlier, right? So we've obviously started the season well last season, had that patch in the middle, ended strong. And what we were able to do is continue that strong run. I think we've won 14 of our last 16 games or something like that, which is a pretty good stat if you look at it on the balance of things. And when you consider that, especially during the Club World Cup, he was able to experiment and try different things out with formations. It seems like he's bringing a little bit of tactical fluidity in, and he's getting the players to understand what he wants across different systems. I think it's really great having that little bit of a refresh to say, okay, guys, you get 3 weeks off. You've done fantastic. Everyone leaves on a high and comes back even, hungrier to build on that. I think it'll work really well in our favor.
I mean, yeah, fair enough. I did want to give Maresca his flowers on the way he managed the squad and the game time he shared around the tournament as well. Um, in the latter part of the season, like you mentioned, when we did turn around our form, it came down to Maresca kind of going through that learning curve of game management, but also squad management. And again, we saw examples of that during the tournament, and a lot of players got medals, which I like to see, because when it comes to the transfer window, we are not a very like we don't promote loyalty, We're gonna do what's best for us as a club, financially. So yeah, it's nice to see that, okay, fine, off the pitch, it's very cutthroat, but on the pitch, somebody like an Asugo, who may not get so many minutes during the tournament, is still holding on to a medal, and they've achieved something already with the club. So in terms of squad management, big tick in the checkbox there for Maresca. Like you say, tactical flexibility demonstrated. A lot has been made about his play in the final, and it's one of those things where, in hindsight, we always knew that he had the capability. Maresca at least had the nous, the know-how to find ways to beat teams, right? And you know, sometimes during the last season, he did get it wrong. but managers should be allowed to make mistakes. It's not like they're perfect, and you hope that they learn over time. Um, the other thing, though, Maresca relies on his players to execute, right? So you mentioned very correctly that we were able to bring our end of season form over into the Club World Cup. Are you now saying that, okay, you actually trust these guys to perform at this level and be consistent every week?
I think I do. Um, Even though it was just two games, versus Milan and Leverkusen, I think we showed that, there is this continuity, and I think that's going to be a word you'll hear from me a lot when we even talk about the squad. There's been a lot of continuity in the way the players are showing up on the pitch. We had what looked like a what looked like could be a starting 11 versus Milan. That could be the starting 11 versus Palace, and I wouldn't be surprised. And yeah, I think that these guys are one season wiser, one season um learned in the system, and one season of success that they've tasted that's going to just make them, it's like the perfect combination to go out there and build on that. So I think consistency we see. Yeah. What about you?
I mean, yeah, I heard people in the media equating this to our League Cup win under Mourinho as the start of an era, right? Is that kind of how you're positioning this in your mind?
um it could be, because there are some pretty big talents in there who are very they have potential to be like big names for us going forward. And you did mention the club is very ruthless in that if there is business to be had, they'll have it. But I think given the names we have in the squad, it's not just you're not just talking about one, like you're building around one player or two players, right? You have a Cole Palmer and Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo, three big names who are like always on your starting 11. You have Cucurella who's really showing up and like making a case to be one of the best in the world at his position. And you have other talent, I mean, like who are still really young and the potential is high. I mean, you think about a Colwell, it would be his third season, I guess, starting in our team, but he's not even 23, or he's just about 23 now. So I mean, yes, he's going to have one season out, but he has the advantage of youth on his side. It's not like he's at 26 and he's gone and done his ACL and it might end his career, right? So, with that view in mind, very strong possibility to build, to be like the building blocks of like a dominant era in our history.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, we'll come to our expectations for the season later on in the pod, but I guess we're going to talk about now the squad that's going to get us to where we think we're going to go, right? So, um, I guess let's just dive straight in, right? Because you are you call me the tactical. I'm not really so sure what you call the transferissimo. Is that what we're going with? I don't know.
Just someone who's on top of it, that's all. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
lots of movement, lots of movement. Looking at like we've spent over 200 million this transfer window so far, but we've also sold over 200 million pounds. I'm talking as of the 11th of August. So it's a really busy window. I think spend wise, we've only been gulfed by Liverpool, who are having an insane window. But I mean, how they'll translate that. I think Salah's looking out of confidence, and they didn't do too well. I think they lost to Palace in the Community Shield finally. They went to penalties, I know, and they lost, right? Salah missed a penalty. So yeah, we'll see how they translate that. But yeah, overall on our squad, quite a lot of business done. And who do you think has been our standout by this window?
I mean, look, I play when I do play football. It's usually a centre back or centre mid, so I am partial to like a Jarell Hato or a Dario Sugo. Sugo, man, like when they signed him and all the Twitterverse or the Xverse, whatever you want to call it, were going off about how this guy is basically a carbon copy of Caicedo. I mean, if he gets even to 70-80% of Caicedo's level, we'll be happy, you know? But yeah, he's already showing signs for me that he can reach there. What I would like to see him add is obviously a bit more passing range, a bit more forward thinking um, from his on the ball play, but his pitch coverage is it's very familiar, you know? We see it week in, week out with Caicedo. So hopefully both midfielders stay fit, touch wood. But you know, when Caicedo does need a rest, I hope Maresca gives Sugo his chance. And yeah, Hato for me, uh, a bit of a needless signing because I really thought that we could make it work with Vega. And this is actually something I wanted to ask you, you know, like essentially it's Vega out for sure. Um, we just don't know where. And Hato's kind of coming in to take up his spot, right? But the whole Vega situation kind of makes me wonder, like if a player, you know, such as Vega says this, that, and everything, and maybe there's some behind the scenes stuff, it's still amicable, nothing too outrageous, right? We've seen worse. What once that happens, is that player's situation pretty much done and dusted at the club? Like, are they on their way out from the moment it happens? Because for me, that's not a sustainable way to maintaining player relationships, right? Of course, you could argue that fine, we sell Vega now and buy him back in the future, but I don't think that he's going to want to come back necessarily. So yeah, like, is the Vega situation a sign that we would rather like go into the market to solve our problems rather than actually just trying to sort it out directly with the player?
Okay, interesting question. And I'm gonna address this first and then talk about my view on the incomings. Um, so with Vega, right, I think the issue is simply the fact that he doesn't want to play in a position we were asking him to, right? He came in as a left back cover for Cucurella, who was versatile, who could play left center back, could play DM. And what happened is, of course, he said, no, I want to play center back with the World Cup coming up. And he got his move, right, to Juve it was. And I think we're obviously not privy to what's going on behind the scenes or the inner workings, but it seems to me that there was some breakdown in relationships because of that. So when, you know, it was time for him to be reintegrated, I think it was a pretty clear understanding that he doesn't want to be here. The club don't see the space for him. And does that mean that the club is not going to look internally to, bolster when there is an issue? I don't think so. So I think the Hato signing is keeping in with buying young talent with very high ceilings. Hato at 19 has already got at least one full season at Ajax, and he's being talked about in the same breath as Van Dijk when it comes to his ability. So that is keeping in with the profile we've been buying. When it comes to actually looking inwards, I think the Colwill injury is an example of how the club is prepared to look inwards. With Colwill injured, everybody was like talking about who Chelsea's going to go for next. And obviously, since then, the sort of briefing coming out is no, we have Chalobah, we have Tosin, we have Badiashile, we have Anselmino. And with all these guys, there's enough cover, and of course Achimpong as well. There's enough cover and talent that we trust them to fill in the gap that Cole's injury has created. So I think if it was a case of the club's always going to go into the market, they would have just gone out and bought the next best defender after sending Sarr back to Strasbourg. But the fact that they're actually saying no, we're going to hang on to our what we have and at least maybe give them till January shows me there is faith in the model.
So, okay, those are fair points, but Vega still goes in this scenario, and right in the current situation. And for me, it's still a question of okay, well, Colwill's pretty much out for the season or for the majority of the season. We may see him back hopefully in March or April, right? Just going off of precedence, right? Um, and kind of Vega has a similar profile, right? And it's an opportunity to then fit him into the center back position that he does want to play. So why not appease him? Like, I guess instead of asking you what happened in the situation where most of our listeners would probably already know, what do you think is the right thing to do in this scenario? Like, do you try and make amends with the player and try to integrate him back into the squad, or do you think the club is taking the right approach in trying to offload?
I mean, I think I had the same thought as well, that why not just bring Vega back? I'm gonna trust them to just say, okay, maybe it's too far gone and we don't know the what's happening behind the scenes, right? We don't know what the conversations are like. Maybe they have tried this approach and he's not willing to, stick around. Or maybe it's just that they've already registered some sort of firm interest and they don't want to burn bridges. I don't know. It could be any of those things. On paper, when you do have someone you've brought in who's played a little bit under the manager and might have some understanding of the system on your books, it would make sense to say just slot them in. But clearly something's not working, right?
Okay, so the key thing is you trust them. So fair enough. I didn't think you'd be that crazy, but anyway, so far so good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I am keen on the project because they've shown, right? And just in terms of the signings, I think I always look at the attack, and I think Liam Delap has been a pretty smart signing. He's shown his physicality in the games and his sort of the shithousery he's capable of. But I mean, if I just had to say impact from minute one, it has to be João Pedro, man. That guy has come in. He's got what, 4 goals in 4 games that he's played for us already. Between Delap and him, if Jackson goes, which is something we'll talk about, then I think we could be covered, man. And yeah, I'm pretty stoked on how it's looking overall. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying, I think most exciting signing is Estevao. But maybe we'll touch on his situation later. In terms of the outgoings, I mean, I wanted to point out that you've got a player like Kendry Paez, who I think is definitely suffering from the fact that we have too many forwards slash attacking players, and he's gone out to Strasbourg. So hopefully he can get some much earned, much required match day experience in at a European level. I think the key sale for us was Madueke. What are you making of his departure?
Yeah, another one that Arsenal have taken off our books. And I think, look, as a player, I think we went on about how he can be very selfish and makes the wrong decisions a lot of times. And he did have some good moments. I think the hat-trick versus Wolves was probably his best moment in a Chelsea shirt. But given he was hitting a sort of plateau and his impact was diminishing, right? It got to a point where he was being played on whichever wing needed less defensive cover, it seemed to me. Like versus PSG, obviously Neto switched to the left. That's the kind of moment you want. Like if Madueke is your guy, I mean, granted he wasn't even in the squad at that time, but you want someone you can rely on at that moment in time. And I think he had sort of reached his ceiling, and the fact that we got close to 50 million for him, it's a good piece of business from this team.
I think when this was confirmed, I shared a lot of thoughts with you about this at the time. One of them being that, look, this is basically us gambling on Estevao having a higher potential and higher ceiling compared to Madueke. I think you're right. What has cost Madueke is he felt expendable, and that was because he was still making changes to his game. Like you say, he needed to work on his kind of defensive output, even though I actually personally think he had already improved heavily in that regard. There were questions earlier on in the season about his attitude, but ultimately, I think this comes down to the way we operate in the market and the way this board is running the club and the squad. When Arsenal come in for a player, right, who is not crucial, even though at the end of last season, I'll fully admit I was calling him probably our best winger by the end of the season. So when I first saw that we were selling to Arsenal, my initial reaction was, okay, why are we doing this? We're just strengthening our rivals. But um, when you look at the lineup of players we have, and like you say, if you trust the project, this should hopefully pay off, right? And they needed to balance the books to invest elsewhere in the squad, looking at striker, right? So just from that kind of like performance basis, I think I was a bit surprised. I did think he was turning his game around a lot. But I think what's worked against him is the selfishness, is the work rate and the attitude. Even though maybe he was resolving those problems, maybe Maresca probably felt like, okay, this is one we can let go, and open up a spot for somebody else. Again, I think Maresca also probably has to be a very versatile person, a very adaptable person, because his squad can chop and change at any moment. I'm not really sure how much of a say he has in all of this. Um, One thing I would want to point out on this is probably the first successful kind of aspect of the player trading model that these guys are trying to operate with. Because we signed him for like I think 30 odd million, something like that from PSV. And he's been with us for what, 2 seasons, 1.5 seasons, and now you've flipped him for around 50 million, right? So there are very, very few cases. This may be the only case where we've actually flipped a player on the positive side. We've somehow managed to get some value for João Felix, right? But this is really the only prime example of how the model is supposed to work, where, okay, you buy a player under the age of 21, right? You integrate him into your team. He hopefully improves either to a level where you sell him on at a higher valuation, which is what has happened with Madueke, or to a level where he's like a Palmer level, where he's actually in your first team, you know? So, like you say, it's about trusting the project, I think, at this point, and seeing, okay, hopefully these players who we signed now like 2, 3 seasons ago when the board came in, right, when the new ownership came in, they should now start reaching signs of potential or like, close to their potential, depending on how high their ceiling is. And then we start seeing some movements in these kind of older players, the first gen players that came in initially.
Yeah, you're right. So that's the best case of the model working. I think overall the understanding is that if it's a young player who's signed recently and there is more of a potential, they will try to look at gaining as much or getting as much profit out of the deal as they can based on how much, how well the players performed and how much time is still left on their contract. But with certain players, especially the older ones, you think of like a João Felix or a Keenan Drewsbury Hall, who these are not players who are like necessarily, I wouldn't say they're surplus to requirements. Well, João Felix maybe definitely was, but Keenan Drewsbury Hall was still involved, but they're not like critical to the team and they're on the older side. I think with these guys, if they're making enough to say they're not losing, or you think of like an Nkunku where if you go back to January, we were asking for about 50, 60 million for him, and now it's relaxed and we're okay to do a deal for 30 to 40. So I think in these instances where they're recognizing that, okay, they're not going to be able to make such a bank on the player, as long as they don't make a loss, they're happy with it. And I guess overall that keeps the model healthy, right? As long as you're in the black, you're not entering the red, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense as long as we're continuously able to sell off hotels and the women's club to whoever is willing to buy, every season just to make up the numbers. But anyway, that's maybe enough on the transfers in terms of what's been done. How about what's pending? I mean, we'll probably come on to the squad depth in a second, but any like transfers that are happening right now that are still open that you want to point out?
I mean, there's the Garnacho one that we were hoping would die, but just doesn't seem to be. And in fact, it seems we're actively interested. He only wants Chelsea, and there's about a 20 million Gulf valuation from what I understand, but it's probably gonna happen. Yeah, so I don't know how I feel about that one, to be honest. But that and Xavi
I
Simons
think you
are
do
the
know how
two.
you feel, but you also got to remember you did say you would trust the project. So, it's you're caught in a hard place now, right? Because no one wants him. No Chelsea fan I've seen actually wants this guy. And these guys seem to think they know different.
Okay, if you talk about trusting the project, right, and you actually go into the numbers, Garnacho's numbers are actually very good. The problem is his attitude and his face a little bit, but his attitude, right? there were all these leaked lineups when he was not involved. His brother leaks the lineups, and there's all that bullshit that comes with him. That's that, and the fact that just because he's just got a very like irritating like persona. I think that's what pisses me off about him. I don't know if it's like a Jose Mourinho thing where if he's on your side, it works, but if he's against you, it's like it irks you even more. But yeah, if you talk about the project and his footballing ability, his numbers are actually pretty decent. And they would be
I
in a
I don't
different.
I don't want to make this like a stats battle because that's probably very boring for everybody listening to this, right? But okay, if you think about what he's going to be told to do, he's going to be told to be a ball carrier, try and beat his man, get to the byline, put crosses in, or beat his man, cut inside, shoot, or lay on passes, etc., right? From cutting inside. In Europe last season, he was ranked 256th for amongst players who attempted 60 plus dribbles. Um, and this is based on dribble percentage. So I don't know if I don't think that that's very good.
It's not. And okay, look, I'm not going to question your data. It's probably true. I think Gittins is the one who is the ball carrier. If I go back to the data I had, but also with Garnacho, I know he like since 22, 23, top five European leagues, under 21s, he has the most goal contributions. So there's something that they're seeing in him. It looks like it's happening as much as I hate it. So yeah, we're gonna have to deal with that. The other incoming that seems likely has been close to being done if we're to believe Fabrizio is Xavi Simons, but now it appears that City have sort of entered the mix there, so I don't know how that's going to go. Um, but those two are the if I had to say two happening, like still to happen, I think those two look like they'll go through. There is interest in Morgan Rogers, but I don't think anything would happen with that. How do you feel about these incomings before we go to who's expected to leave?
I mean, I point blank don't want Garnacho. I feel like there should be other talent out there. And at this point, it's like, well, then why not just keep the slot for Tyreek George? I did want to touch briefly on like what I saw, what I was impressed with, at least from preseason, right? As you say, it was very short. We only had those two games back to back on in one weekend. But somebody like a Tyreek George actually looked really good. I feel like he added more to his game than most. Once he was out on the left from the start, he actually was able to play a few balls in behind to an underlapping Cucurella, and he played a few crosses into the box, one of which, I mean, Delap really should have scored and given George an assist. But I feel like he's actually um, improving his game, or like markedly, where I haven't seen that so much across the pitch in terms of our other players. And similarly, like or maybe in contrast, Gittins came in, I think, a bit undercooked compared to what I was expecting, right? I think Madueke is definitely better than Gittins. I'm not going to shy away from that, right? I will say that as a fact. I think Madueke is a lot further along the curve, and we've opted now to go back down the curve to a Gittins rather than, I don't know, trying to make it work with like an Nkunku, who it really worked in the Club World Cup where he started on the left, but he drifts infield and opens the left wing up for Cucurella to overlap, you know? So this is where I'm at, with these additions and potential departures. I mean, if you're signing Garnacho, I would say, well, why not give the time to George, or why not play Jackson there? The fans clearly do not want Garnacho, and it's not like we're dumb people who don't know what's going on. I've taken a data point and I've shown it to you, and at the end of the day, he is not going to just be relied upon for okay, running in behind and taking shots and playing like maybe cutbacks from the byline. He will be collecting the ball from wide and be expected to beat his man. And sometimes he'll have to beat two because what teams tend to do is sit deep against us so that it allows them to actually double up on the flanks. Our wingers need to be able to do that, beat two people. And I think an Estevao has the potential to do that. Gittins, only time will tell. But Garnacho, he's already had enough game time to demonstrate that he's not the option for this.
That's fair, man. I think you've put it very well. And yeah, I mean, I know I said I trust the project and I'm going to back that, but at the same time, like, yeah, if this deal like died, it would not like change my world. I'd be very happy if that happened.
It would change your world for the better, and that's what we want for the resident optimists at all times. But coming on to some potential departures, right? This is another talking point. We still, that means, have a lot of, I don't want to call them dead wood, right? Because I think they will go to other clubs eventually and make an impact, barring maybe Raheem Sterling, right? But if you look at somebody like Chilwell, Carney Chukwuemeka, Disasi, Vega, dude, these are like high quality players. I'm not going to say they're world class, but they definitely have things to offer the top European teams.
Yeah, they do. They do have stuff to offer the top teams, and I think that's going to be reflected. I think, like you said, Sterling is the only one who it seems Fulham are interested, and he's wants to stay in the Premier League, wants to stay in London, so that might be where he goes. But the rest, there is interest. Um, I think Carney wants Dortmund, Dortmund wants Carney. It's just about finding the value. Nkunku is an interesting one because, like you said, he did show up in the Club World Cup. The way he played this showed us what might have been, but I think again, too far gone, and it's reached a space where everyone knows it's probably not going to happen. So they're working on getting him out. Now, where he goes is depending on how other things happen. Leipzig are interested in bringing him back, and he's open to that. And they're not linked, but they are sort of linked in that we need an Nkunku off the books to get a Xavi Simons. And I think if they didn't have Xavi Simons, they could accommodate Nkunku much easier. So I think those two are sort of, without being called a swap deal, essentially going to look something like that. But another option has emerged where Kingsley Coman is going to Al Nassr, which is a bit of a surprise for me. And that means Bayern could be interested in Nkunku. So that is how that could play out. Um, the other one that has emerged with just, I guess, the way everything went after his injury is Jackson looks like he could be out. And again, I know you I feel like at least once on the last three pods you've mentioned Jackson on the left wing, but I don't think Maresca and everyone sees him being used like that. He's more of an out and out striker, and I think with the way his last few games have gone and this sort of striker domino situation that's happening right now with Isak forcing his way out of Newcastle, Watkins remains in play. I think Jackson could be contingent on that happening. I think that the situation with Jackson is that if he doesn't go, Maresca is happy to have him around and will reintegrate him. But if they do get the right offer, they will accept it. And they had initially quoted around 80 million when United asked, apparently. And at that stage, it was like, oh, are we just quoting this price to, just to scare people off? But no, I think based on how much Ekitike is gone for, how much Sheshko is gone for, they're genuinely saying, no, we want an offer in the range of around 70 million to actually sell Jackson. So that's contingent on how these other things play out. I think Tariq George also, I take your point. I mean, 100% him over Garnacho, if you had to just think about justifying the funds that you're going to spend, you'd keep him. But again, if the price is right, we'll sell. Otherwise, a loan might happen because he wants regular minutes, and I think he sees with Gittins there, with the way other players can also play at that position. Because if Estevao really does hit the ground running, which he has already, and he can translate that to the league, then he's going to play at the right, which means your best winger at the Club World Cup, Pedro Neto, probably ends up on the left, right? So that means he's got Neto and then Gittins ahead of him. So in that case, he probably says, well, yeah, it's better for me to seek minutes elsewhere. So that's how that happens. Actually, the only player who's not 100% sure is Chilwell, actually, from what I've read.
I mean that's in a way that might that might be beneficial because of Colwell's injury, right? If Hato can also cover that left centre back spot, I don't think we'll see Chilwell integrated because I think we've learnt enough from the way this board and the way this management team operate. But if there's an off chance we could integrate somebody, I would love it to be Chilwell, Champions League winner with us, man. And like he adds something to this squad that we don't have. And I know that sounds really dumb to say because this squad is massive, right? But Cucurella and Hato are quite similar. I mean, actually, this discussion will bring us onto the squad depth and what are our thoughts on how we're set up for the coming season. But if I jump straight into left back, right? I mean, I love our left back slot because Cucurella can. We've seen him invert into left centre back. We've seen him invert into central midfield, defensive and attacking, and we've seen him overlap on the left wing, right? But if there's one player who's better than him at overlapping on the left wing, it's Benny Boy Chilwell. Do you know what I mean? So if you keep Chilwell for a little bit of experience, the guy is homegrown, and at this point, his cost has already been paid off years ago, right? So if we're able to reintegrate him, like for me, that's like kind of saying, okay, we don't have to dip our toes into the market to replace Colwill, and we're not necessarily relying on the fitness of Badia Shield or like reintegrating Vega. We're reintegrating somebody who, is a mature guy. He understands his place in the team, and he also, on the flip side, hopefully gets some game time with us and can start to build up his value again. I mean, how is that? How does that left back position look to you?
I mean, you've made a good case for Chilwell, and I think he's a firm fan favorite. If there was a player that people would like to see reintegrated, I think Chilwell's name would definitely feature in that conversation. But Chilwell not being there, I mean, with the current situation, Cucurella and Hato looks pretty strong to me. I think Cucurella has shown that he has legs on him, and I think he took the first season to really settle in. He went through a bit of a tough time just settling in, but having settled and now the way he's grown into his game, he's looking immense. And I think Hato as a deputy for him, um, or at left center back if he needs to play there because he is capable. I think that's fine. I'm confident. I think one of the key areas I highlighted that we needed reinforcements in was the left back position. And I'm happy that we've gone out and done this piece of business. It fits, like I said, it fits the model perfectly. So I'm very confident with that. In fact, I think across the back line, it looks pretty solid in that, of course, that was prior to the Colwell injury. Sorry. So looking at James and Gusto as your right backs with Achimpong able to play there. Fofana, who looks to be on the road to recovery. And if we can manage his minutes, Fofana there, Chaloba and Tosin who can cover at that right center back. And then there was Colwell and Badiashile at left center back and Anselmino in the mix as well. I think barring the Colwell injury, it looked pretty good. And it could be an area of concern, but I mean, with the right rotation and managing minutes, if we don't make another signing, I don't see it being the worst thing in the world. How do you feel about that back four?
I mean, honestly, isn't this the reason we have such a big squad in the first place? So that if players get injured, right, you have the next in line stepping up. So by their own logic, we should now just have full faith in Badiashile or Hato to step in at left centre back if you want a left-footed left centre back.
Exactly.
We have operated, teams have operated for decades without that. And you're looking like a Chalobah or a Tosin can probably go and fill in at left centre back. And Selmino, I don't think he's at a level, so I don't think we'll see him play. Achampong can go and fill at left centre back as well. So in terms of depth, it's fine. In terms of quality depth, different question. But this is the point, right, of having such a big squad. So I fully back them not dipping their toes into the market. But what we do need to have is versatility and optionality, right? So in a game where Maresca identifies that, okay, on the right-hand side, we want to allow like Pedro Neto or Estevao to run at their fullback and be isolated against them. But on the other side, we want to create overloads and you want an overlapping fullback. I think that that's where, you on the right-hand side, you have James and Gusto. For me, I've said this all of last season, and I think you're on the same page. Gusto is an overlapping fullback. Let him go forward on the right-hand side. He doesn't have to be a touchline fullback. He can underlap, but he still goes forward. The problem with him underlapping and going forward is sometimes maybe he gets too high up the pitch when we give the ball away. And he's not used to making those sort of recovery runs. Whereas, like when he plays for France, right? He's overlapping as a touchline fullback, and he looks great. That he's arguably going to be one of the best in the world at doing that. He's got the potential to do it. He's got the pace, the athleticism, and the know-how, right? So on the right-hand side, you already have the complete optionality. You don't get it from one player all of the time, right? James used to be capable of doing all three. I don't think he can overlap anymore. I don't think he's got the legs, but he can invert, right? And on the left-hand side, you're actually getting all three from Cucurella, right? I don't want to knock his overlapping play, like his wing play, but I do think you already have a better option on that left-hand side. So that's the only point I was trying to make with Chilwell. But I think, like you say, in terms of the defense overall, we're looking pretty stacked. The question is like, okay, how much do you expect from Maurice James this season? He had 32 appearances last season, which one would argue that's probably not enough appearances as a club captain. But what are you expecting to see from him this season?
Consistency. I think when we talked about make or break seasons last time around when we were doing this pod, we said Reece James, it could be a make or break season for his Chelsea career because of his injuries. And I think Maresca has managed it well. He had 32 appearances, but it was pretty consistent. I think you felt his presence all through, and I want to see him build on that, right? So considering that there's going to be a very high number of high quality games, with Champions League now in place of Conference League, we're going to need to rely on that quality. So I just want to see him all through and maintain his fitness, and I think it's the same with the likes of Fofana and eventually Lavia when he's back to his fitness, where these are players who have really high ceilings and what their potential is. We just need to make sure that they convert that to appearances.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's
So
it's good that you mentioned Fofana, right? Fofana, 14 appearances last season, none before that, and then 22 appearances. I think that would have been for Leicester, right? The season before that. Badiashile, 22 appearances last season, 22 the season before, and 27 the season before that. I mean, these guys are not Fofana and Lavia are definitely not hitting the numbers we would like to see, and these injury problems are persisting year on year. I mean, it basically speaks to their potential and how they're viewed by the board, right? As to why we're keeping them, right? But what does that say about their reliability, right? And also now, who does Maresca rely on in that first game against Palace?
the best ability is availability, right? That's how it goes. I think said that before on this pod. Yeah, I mean, who he relies on. I mean, the Palace game is game one, right? We're looking at a season which is going to go at least 60 games, I think. If there's deep runs in all competitions, you're gonna need that consistency, and I think you could argue that yes, there is depth, and he could make up the numbers by playing, rotating every 2 games. But what that's going to do is lead to a lack and a drop in consistency, right? Players building chemistry and all of that. So I think it's going to be something he has to identify very early on. I think Tosin and Chalobah to start might be how we see for at least the first 3 or 4 games. While the rest are getting up to fitness before we see other combinations tried. And I also think he's gonna do that thing where when there is a match which, the opposition may not be as high quality, he will rotate and bring in players who and help them build minutes. I think that way I'm confident that he will have the right approach to help players build their minutes and build their fitness because he showed that. It's just will that hinder us or cause us to drop points is what may be, something to look out for.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I was gonna bring up the fact that like Badia Shields' playing record isn't great for us in terms of his appearances. Meanwhile, we've got, Vega who had a great season. Well, maybe not great, but a good season with Juventus last season. So, you know, there's a potential to swap them in and out there, and suddenly Vega becomes your first choice left centre back while Colwell is injured. But I think we've talked enough about the Vega issue, right? So moving just a little bit further forward, I think Caicedo and Asugo pretty solid for a center defensive mid, right? No real issues there. Um, I did want to raise this though. I mean, Asugo basically being relied on as a backup. This is a good thing, right? I mean, he's obviously impressed Maresca off the pitch, so in training, and he's got his faith, right?
Yeah, I would imagine so. I think the whole midfield unit seems to be pretty settled. Caicedo and Asugo at the DMC, and then Enzo, Lavia, and Santos up ahead. And I think everyone there has cemented their quality. It's just about their availability, especially Lavia. And if they are like if Lavia can work on his fitness and everyone is, readily available, it's a great selection headache for Maresca to have. I think that's the probably the most settled part of the pitch when everyone is fit.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't feel like it, but Lavia 22 appearances last season, which I guess is, it's an improvement from one the season before. So hopefully, there's no doubt about his quality. And his injury record does mean that, fine, if you've got two central midfield spots in your system, assuming you're playing a 4-2-3-1, right? Having those five central midfielders is good depth, and there's going to be enough games for them all to share. With Lavia being kind of, again, he's being nurtured back up to what could resemble full fitness for the first time in his playing career. Because yeah, I guess when he was playing for Southampton, he was still a kid, right? Like teenager. So um, I don't think he's actually reached the peak of his fitness levels or anywhere near, but hopefully he's on the right way up. And the reason I brought up this point about Esugo actually is because I'm looking like, uh, is his name Matthias Amugu, right? Is it Matthias?
Matis
Yeah, Matthijs Amugu.
Yeah.
So he came in first before Esugo, right? In that one transfer window, and he's now being sold back to Strasbourg. From where I'm standing, right? Trusting the project, trusting the manager, taking all of that fluffy shit into consideration. That's those are signs to me that maybe Amugu is not got the ceiling that Asugo has got. And Maresca has seen this through training and maybe some, reserve games or wherever these guys have been playing behind the scenes, right? And they've made a call to push Amugu back to Strasbourg to just like kind of get some game time and increase his value. Whereas Asugo is actually trusted with that backup to Caicedo role.
Yeah, I think that's one of the attributes of this group where it's if they're gonna make a mistake, they're not gonna, drag it out. They're gonna admit it's a mistake and cut their losses very quickly.
But so one mistake that they have no choice but to drag out is Mudryk. That's not really up to them. But do we have any news on Mudryk's? I guess look, his B sample was also positive, tested positive for whatever substance that they were checking for. But we have no word on his sentencing yet.
No, but I think it's one of those where likely everything happens in private, and even if he does appeal, I don't think he doesn't get to play anytime soon. And it could be a situation where, the club just say, okay, we're gonna terminate your contract, and it's like a mutual sort of agreement that they reach because of how it's played out. Yeah, because it I guess is similar in the way it happened with Pogba as well, where he tested and then he had like a what was it, a 4-year ban or something. So if that is the case, I don't expect them to just keep him on the books indefinitely, right?
Yeah. Um, and I think his situation is obviously why we're still seeing movement in that left wing spot because again, looking at our kind of depth laid out on a pitch map, right? You look at left wing and if you're not playing Nkunku or Jackson there, then it does look very weak, right? Because technically your first choice is probably Gittins since Mudryk is not available. And then second choice is George or the other way around, neither of whom are world beaters, right? Whereas you would say on the right-hand side is probably Neto's preferred position, with Palmer being number 10 and Esteval being a rotational option on right wing or number 10. I know all of those players can play left wing, and Palmer had a great performance in the Club World Cup at left wing. But again, he was playing as an inside forward, so he was mainly positioned inside the pitch instead of on the flank. So yeah, I think left wing definitely needs some sprucing up, just not with Garnacho, you know? It's there has to be somebody better than that. I mean, if Arsenal weren't in for Rodrigo, Arsenal and obviously bigger teams, right, than us, I would say like shit, man. Rodrigo basically completes the set, you know. I don't have you heard anything on Chelsea's move for Rodrigo, or was that just very rumor level?
I think it's very rumor level. I don't think we go in for him more so because of the UEFA sanctions and the rule that we have to follow, which is basically that the in the Champions League registered squad, the net we've spent on incomings cannot exceed how much we've got from outgoings. So that's going to make the squad balance very difficult. And Rodrigo really skews that significantly. I think the money, the finances involved in a deal for Rodrigo would not make it feasible.
Okay, so basically we're looking at another season of right wing dominated play. But who's to say, that won't work?
Yeah.
Prashant will obviously be the optimist on this. And then striker position, I think we're overall really happy with Delap and Pedro's introduction to the squad. Both have got goals in the Club World Cup and in preseason. Prashant's pointed out that Nkunku and Jackson are on the way out, most likely. Um, anything to add there? I think depth-wise, we're very good now at striker, right?
Yeah, I mean, if these guys continue to keep up the performances with the quality in the Premier League, I think we're good. We can't move on further though without addressing our favorite position. And I don't know, I didn't do this intentionally, but it's happened. We've left goalkeepers out, so we have to talk about our favorite, Robert Sanchez.
But we laugh, but he is actually becoming low-key a favorite, man. This guy is like redemption arc is, mate, it's rivaling some of, I don't know, this is like something out of a Marvel or a DC comic, you know what I mean?
Captain Bob to save the day.
I think he prefers Captain Sanchez, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, but I mean, yes,
Yeah,
he had a really good Club World Cup as well. And I think Sanchez, Jorgensen, and Slanina, as much as I would have liked to see Petrovic, I think the club have, decided to get the value where they got it. And um, it does seem to be decent depth. What do you think about that? And obviously, the latest is Donnarumma may be available. Do you feel like we should make a move for him, considering we were looking at Magnon just before the Club World Cup? Or are you happy with these three?
I just think like Donnarumma would just it would be too much for our wage structure. I know what these guys are, how these guys are trying to operate the club, right? So with that in mind, I don't think they will approach. If you're asking me whether I would, 100% I would. He's arguably the best goalkeeper in the world, right? And I whatever we say about Sanchez improving, I don't think he raises our floor as much as Donnarumma does in terms of a squad depth level. Um, but yeah, I don't see it happening. And I think the same has like Fabrizio et al. Have all said similar things that Chelsea are not really looking to strengthen in this area. And you got to assume that's because Sanchez has really stepped up his game. The question now is consistency. Um, so, I guess before we go into predictions, one final point on the transfers was looking at the players we've added and sold, right? Um, would you say our starting 11 has changed a lot, like drastically, significantly? Or would you say like we've made changes in the right area and you don't expect team chemistry and pitch chemistry to have been detrimentally impacted by the chopping and changing in the squad?
Oh, I'm definitely in the latter bucket. I think, again, something we alluded to on the last pod, we talked about continuity. I think there's been a really strong sense of continuity across the entire club. And I don't think the chemistry has been impacted by the incoming players because we've seen them make an impact positively. You've seen, like we said, Delap and Estevao and João Pedro have been in on the goals as well. Gittins also has looked a little lively. So I think overall we're in a place where we're primed to improve. I don't expect the chemistry drop off to be there at all, actually. I think it's just going to be better because there's the full buy-in. I think having won not just, the Conference League, but also the Club World Cup, giving the players a taste of that, giving the players coming in a view of, look, this is a young squad. There is a collective vision and a collective buy-in to that vision. Get on board, and you're seeing it reap the benefits. I don't think that we should be impacted negatively, but that's just me. What's your take?
You know me, I'm always going to say we're negatively impacted. So now I think you're probably right. I'm just looking at the names on the squad depth map, and I think Sanchez starts in goal. Ideally, James starts against Palace. Obviously, if everything being equal and fit, Fofana and Cole will start, but they won't. But I think you're looking at a backline of James, Tosin, Chalobah, and Cucurella, assuming Chalobah is not actually injured, which Maresca has confirmed post that match against AC Milan. So, and if you look at that back four, back five, including the keeper, pretty standard stuff, right? And then you look at a midfield of Caicedo and Fernandez. I don't think Santos, Sugo, Lavia, none of those will be starting. And then you're probably looking at maybe a surprise. Well, not as surprising as maybe Gitten starting, but I think Esteval will start against Palace. And Palmer at the 10, Pedro Neto on the left with João Pedro up top. So really, you're only looking at the right wing or basically one of the attacking midfield slots and the striker position where we've seen change. And the signs are good, right? We're not saying that it's always going to be like this, but the signs are good that one of either João Pedro or Delap will start, and they have already shown they link up with the squad pretty well. So yeah, I agree with your assessment on that. And yeah, relatively speaking, this has been let's say, a less turbulent transfer window, but it's all relative because compared to other clubs, yeah, we're still making serious moves, but compared to our previous windows, yeah, this has been quite a calculated one, I would say. So having said all of that, how are you rating the squad overall?
On a 10, um, I'd rate this squad an 8. I think I'm pretty optimistic on the potential and what we've seen so far. So I'm gonna give it an 8. I don't think, I mean, going back to the start of the window, I thought, we'd make a big name transfer in the striker department, and maybe we would have gone for another bigger name left wing. But other than those, I mean, we didn't do that, but the way it's looking, I think I'm happy with it. I can't think of any player who's available who would come in right now and, massively like improve the squad. Maybe a Rodrigo, but again, like, or a Donnarumma, actually, that's two players we've already discussed. But yeah, I think an 8, maybe a 7, actually, if I'm being realistic. Fine, 7 we'll go with. What about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna say a solid 7 here. I think there's definitely been some intelligent acquisitions because we needed strikers, and we brought in two um, who are considered high potential. I'm not sure. I'm not really good at like telling the potential, right? I'm not a scout, but these guys look like they're on track to have good careers, right? Um, and then of course that right wing spot. I say it was smart business, but really, you know, we have so many of these left-footed players now who, cut in or whatever. So hence moving on of Madueke. So yeah, I think overall in the transfer window, I think we've made some very good moves in terms of the sales, better than expected in terms of the sales. And where that leaves the squad, I would say is a 7 out of 10. The gaps are clearly there's still just some minor doubts about Sanchez because he can't have gone through the whole of last season and then changed our minds over one good tournament in the summer, right? Then you're looking at um, I think a title winning team has world class centre backs, right? I'm not looking at any of our centre backs. I would say Fofana is probably our best out and out centre back. I think Colwill still has gaps in his defensive game, but I think overall centre back is like maybe a 6 or 6.5 out of 10, and it's bringing the average down. And then, yeah, midfield, we're looking pretty stacked. And left wing is another area that needs serious improvement. Now, whether we do that in the market or whether, we find different solutions with the players that are already on the books, which is my preference, it remains to be seen. But I'm just going off of what is more likely to happen as of today. And that's why I'm saying left wing, even if you add Garnacho, for me, I would bring the rating down in that scenario. So, you know, yeah, 7 out of 10 seems fair. But I do think credit to the board, who have done some very good business this summer.
Yeah, that seems fair. And with that, we're at the end of part one of what's proving to be a very long preseason episode. Part two is going to cover our season predictions and what we're expecting from the first 5 games. So look out for that tomorrow, just in time for the game on Sunday. If you like what you've heard so far, definitely leave us a review over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and share this episode with other Chelsea fans. You can also let us know what you think about our take over on X at We Burn Blue Pod. We also have a league on FPL this year. Sharon's going to be managing the team as he looks to make an FPL comeback, so we're really looking forward to that. The code to join is XCYKSN, and the auto join link will also be in the episode description. So we look forward to seeing you there. All right, that's it from me. See you in part two.